It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. We have a few questions about the router Y configuration we talked about last week, plus security news, and the hack of the decade. That's what Steve says. It's actually pretty cool. All coming up next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. Hi, everybody. It's time for our annual audience survey. We'd really like to hear from you. It helps us understand our audience better, know what you like and don't like, how you listen to the show. It also helps us tell advertisers what kind of people listen. But I promise you, your feedback is always kept personally anonymous. All you have to do is visit twit.tv/survey and let us know what you think. It'll just take a few minutes, and it'll help us make Twit even better. We really appreciate your support and any help you can give us. twit.tv/survey. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 546, recorded Tuesday, February 9th, 2016, our router Q&A follow-up. Security Now is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Right now, get free expedited FedEx shipping when you go to ring.com/securitynow. And by Squarespace. Squarespace is the simplest way to create a beautiful website. Plus, with a developer platform, you can customize the code behind any Squarespace design. Enter the offer code SecurityNow, and you get 10% off Squarespace. You should. And by Audible.com. To download the free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. It's time for Security Now, the show where we cover the latest news in the security and privacy realm with this guy here, Mr. Stephen Gibson of the GRC Corporation of SpinRite fame. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Leo. Great to be with you again, as always.
Yeah.
For our 11th year of this podcast.
So ever since year 4 or something, we've been doing a Q&A at every other show. Although sometimes the news intervenes.
Yeah, I think it's been very effective. It allows it engages our audience. It lets them it gives me great feedback into like what things have traction, what they care about. So it's allowed me to tune the podcast over the years. In this case, the last week's topic, the 3 dumb routers topic, was of overwhelming interest because I think it's clear to everyone. In fact, Brian Krebs has his most recent posting is about this, and it just happened, and I didn't have a chance to look at it, so I've got it bookmarked for next week. But he's talking about the Internet of Things problem, and anyone who's been following security and device security understands that the Internet of Things is going to be a problem. So last week's idea was to really get down in the weeds more than we have, and several people did note either by Twitter or email that Steve, you've talked about this Y configuration several times. It's like, yeah, I know, because it's the one, but we never went into it in this level of detail. And I think as the questionable security of a growing number of tantalizing things that would be hung off of one branch of the Y, as that becomes increasingly worrisome but prevalent, because I think Internet of Things is clearly in the process of happening, then the security, the need to somehow isolate those that are almost certainly, we could say absolutely are going to have problems, becomes increasingly important. As a consequence, that last week's episode had a ton of traction, but generated the majority of responses via Twitter and the email bag. So what I've done is and we sort of ran out of time, and we had a full 2-hour episode last week because I wanted to get into this and explain. But there's some subtleties about inter-router routing or IP routing that I didn't get to, which raised some questions. So I have 3 questions that actually happen to all just have come in via Twitter that I selected, which we will put at the end of today's other stuff, the week's news and miscellaneous trivia and so forth, in order to give sort of to keep with the theme, but again, driven by our listeners. So, and we had an interesting week, not crazy. There was, of course, the famous, what is becoming infamous, I guess, Error 53 that we'll talk about. Comodo has done something. In my notes, I wrote down Comodo's crummy Cromodo browser. They actually took the Chromium source and created the Cromodo browser and did something so awful. I mean, that, Tavis Ormandy at Google is running around with his hair on fire again, and rightly so, as we'll see. So we'll explain that. And I just feel sorry for people who go to a site and say, oh, look, here's a super secure browser from Comodo. We'll explain why in a minute. There was an interesting audit of Windows 10. I think I heard you talking about it yesterday on Twit, how promiscuous Windows 10's communication to the net is. Unfortunately, the /dot posting that got all the attention was completely incorrect in what it stated. So it turns out it's not nearly as bad as people who just read the headlines would be led to believe. I have some experience with GWX and a recent Win 7 install of mine that I want to share. Then I ran across the amazing, clever hack of the decade. What is this, 2016? Yeah, of the decade. Certainly the funnest, most cool idea in the last 6 years. So of the 21st century. And then a little bit of update on what's going on with Zio and sleep monitoring. And we'll actually then, believe it or not, go back to routers and talk about that some.
Now, I noticed that your show notes don't, as they often do, have an illustration of the week. So I'd like to proffer one.
Oh, please.
For you. This comes from a tweet from Randy Crum, who listens to the show. And you may remember I was saying we need a new diagram for the router, the Y router setup that you described, because your page is outdated. He proposes this one, which you'll all recognize.
The flux capacitor.
As the flux capacitor from Back to the Future. And in fact, it is a Y. He has relabeled, the Dymo labels now say guests, main network, root router, and internet. But it still does say, and I think it should, shield eyes from light. So thank you, Randy, I really love it that he added the Dymo labels to explain this. So if you want, I'll send this along to you. He included you in the tweet. You probably have it in your pile.
Yes, I did see it before.
Isn't that great? Thank you, Randy.
Very cool.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, let me do an ad. Would you mind?
Nope, please.
And it's for an Internet of Things device. So highly appropriate. In this case, it's for our beloved Ring Video doorbell. And as we mentioned on this show, there was some concern. A security researcher had found that if somebody takes your Ring off the door and plugs it into a computer,
if they have full physical access to the device.
Yeah, they can then get your Wi-Fi password off of it. But what I want to make sure everybody knows is that the security researcher who found this notified Ring immediately before he went public with it. And I didn't know this, that Ring has a mechanism for over-the-air updates for the doorbell because it is connected to your Wi-Fi. And they fixed it. They patched it before it was ever disclosed, so no one was ever vulnerable. Unfortunately, those kinds of news stories, people remember the headline. They don't remember the follow-up. So I just want to make sure you understand. We're talking about a great device that I feel I use with confidence. In fact, I don't know if I could live without it now, the Ring Video Doorbell. So the idea is you replace your existing dinger and a donger with a special new doorbell. By the way, they have a variety of finishes and styles, so it will match your door jamb. And this will work actually without a wired doorbell as well, but because it has a big battery in it. It lasts for a year, and you can recharge it over USB. So you can certainly put it anywhere you want a doorbell, whether there's wires there or not. In my case, I had, as many homes do, I had a wired doorbell, kind of a junky thing that goes to chimes in the house that I never hear. And one of my big problems was I just didn't ever hear the doorbell ring, even when I was home. So it was just trivial. 2 screws, you take the old doorbell off, 2 wires come out of the door jamb. The Ring Video Doorbell comes with everything you need to install it, including actually a much nicer mounting, a back plate with terminals, so the wires go into the terminals, and then the ring goes on the back plate. You've got, if you would need it, you wouldn't. If in my case, I have existing installation, a drill bit, a special screwdriver with 2 bits, the special Torx bit that attaches the doorbell, the security bolt that attaches the doorbell to the frame, and a regular Phillips head. Also a level, which I think is a nice touch, so you can install it level. And if you need to do, and I did not, to put new screws in or sink screws, it's got all of that as well. It was really easy to install. I unscrewed the old doorbell, mounted the plate, put the new doorbell on top of it. You pair it to your Wi-Fi, and let's encourage you to do that Y setup that Steve recommends, or put it at least on the guest Wi-Fi setup of your home. And then what's cool is when somebody rings the doorbell, even when I'm home, it rings my phone, it rings my tablets. In fact, there's a cacophony in my house now, and I never miss the doorbell. But the best part is I never miss a doorbell even when I'm at work, because it not only rings my local devices, it rings over the internet. And it has motion detection. So I know when somebody's lurking on my doorstep. This HD camera is a fisheye camera, so it gets everything. It has a speaker and a microphone, so I can talk to people on my doorstep, press a button on my phone, wherever I am, anywhere in the world. I can say, yeah, can I help you? If it's a box, if it's a delivery, I say, just leave it there. I'm in the shower, but I'll be right out. And if it's somebody snooping around to see that what's in that box, I could say, hey, I see you. Get away from there. It turns out that 95% of all home robberies happen while you're at work. The bad guy comes to your door, rings the doorbell. If you don't answer, goes around back, breaks in. Well, now you've got crystal clear video of him, and you can even talk to him and scare him off. And we have listeners. Neo sent me a tweet. He said, it happened to me. It happened to me, and I've got the video. The Ring Video Doorbell. It's like having a neighbor keep an eye on your home 24/7, except it's not a neighbor, it's you. I love it. You're going to love it, too. We've arranged for expedited FedEx shipping. Be a great gift for family members if you're worried about their safety and security. It's wonderful. It's about $200, but you get free FedEx shipping when you go to ring.com/security now. Time Magazine and USA Today named it one of their top 10 gadgets of 2015. And I concur heartily. In fact, this company is very interesting. They've got some new stuff coming along as well. Ring Video Doorbell. ring.com/security now for free expedited FedEx shipping. You're going to love your Ring. I can't live without it. There are other Internet of Things devices that I installed and didn't bring with me when we moved. This one's going with me anywhere I go. Ring.com/security now. All right,
I was just going to comment on exactly that there are, it's the nature of the way that the market is now that people are going to have internet-connected soccer balls and
everything.
Milk cartons,
yeah.
and
and by the way, there's some value to that. It's not, it's not a
can't exactly can't and in this instance, the connectivity is clearly part of the core functionality, so it makes sense. In other instances, it's like they're trying to come up with something to sell or some way to raise venture capital or something. So it's like okay, but as you said. There are applications that absolutely make sense.
Yeah, and I don't really care if my refrigerator is connected to the internet. In fact, I think that's probably a bad idea.
I think not.
They'll have to convince me on that one.
So, top of the week is this Error 53. And you guys were discussing it on Mac Break. Cory Doctorow, of course, picked up on it. And I pulled just a couple sentences out of what Cory wrote. From his coverage of it from Friday. He said, according to an Apple spokesperson, Error 53 is an anti-tampering measure designed to protect the integrity of the phone's biometric security system. The lockout is designed to protect users from trusting doctored fingerprint readers that might allow unauthorized access to their phones. But the phones that Apple is remotely killing have not been doctored. They've been fixed. There are many independent service centers for Apple's products where you can get your phone fixed more cheaply than the official rate. Independent service centers also thrive in places where there are no Apple service centers at all. So I need to back up a little bit and explain that what's happening is that there sort of was what was initially a mysterious error 53, which the phone was generating after it had been repaired and then stopping being a phone. It essentially bricked itself. And I don't take this as being nefarious or deliberate or anti-competitive. I think this is just good security. And I think we need to clearly Apple needs to respond to this and needs to figure out how they can achieve their goal of protecting their user while allowing a phone with sensitive content to be securely serviced. I mean, it's, anyone who's messed around with, for example, higher end servers will know that computer cases often have a switch that detects when the case has been opened, because physical access is a almost super powerful thing to have for a device. And the same is apparently true here. Now, I wonder, given everything we've heard about the way the fingerprint reader works and the secure enclave, my sense is that what this may be detecting is an interruption in the connectivity. That is a however brief disconnection of the fingerprint reader from the secure enclave element. The point being that somebody could insert something in the phone which captures your fingerprints. That is, physical access is incredibly powerful. And so what I imagine the security conscious engineers of Apple did, and I endorse it fully, is they said, okay, here's something that we're offering to users with our guarantee that a fingerprint properly registered is the only thing that can unlock it, and it's safe. But with that comes an assumption that somebody isn't going to change the design, isn't going to, the perfect classic old school example is a keystroke monitor in line in the keyboard. If someone has physical access to your computer, they can stick a tiny little chewing gum size thing between your keyboard and your computer, logging every keystroke you type. We haven't talked about those for years. They've sort of gone out of fashion because now we're at another level of fancy remote exploits. But that kind of thing could be done to a phone, capturing fingerprints, or maybe a little tiny transmitter gets added to it. And so it may very well be that Apple is quite appropriately detecting when that has happened. So I would argue that this is something that everyone needs to be educated about, and there needs to be some process for handling it. But I don't take the position, and I don't think it's a fair position to say that this is somehow, Apple doing, deliberately stifling competition. In fact, Renee said on MacBreak an hour ago that even Apple's own service has this happening, so that when somebody at Apple service does something wrong, whoops, that can trigger this error.
But they are in the good position of being able to give you a new phone, whereas a third-party guy probably won't give you a new phone. So
yeah. So is what's the legal position on third-party service? Is it voiding the warranty of the phone? Can Apple say, hey, we're on firm legal grounds here, you shouldn't have gone to
Well, I think I think we'll find out as these class action lawsuits make their way through the courts. But were I a member of the court, I would interpret it probably as an anti-competitive measure, because you could say you void the warranty, but actually willfully destroy the phone because it's been worked on by a third party. That would strike me as bad behavior. But I'm not a lawyer.
It's not like it's like a lithium-ion battery exploding. You don't have to stand back 10 feet. I mean, you could turn it back on. They just turned it off.
Right.
They said something has happened which has a potential for violating your security. This is not a phone anymore. This is currently useful for keeping your door open. But they could certainly reverse that.
I suspect they will. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, and as I said on the show, engineers think this way.
Yes.
And they don't. It's not their job to understand the legal ramifications, or to even
the PR ramifications.
PR ramifications. They think, hey, it's not secure. You wouldn't want to use it.
Right.
Whereas somebody might well want to use it and say, I don't care. I want my phone. So. Hey, do you mind if I interpose another story that we talked about a little bit yesterday, and got your opinion on it? I was doing an interview on triangulation about privacy, and we were talking about the Amazon Echo. And but it doesn't just apply to the Echo; it applies to so many of the devices in our homes now that are
our TVs
listening.
are also listening.
TVs,
yes.
The Kinect from Microsoft. That was the first time we heard these fears. Of course, our phones. And he had quoted in an article, a researcher in privacy and an analyst for Forrester who said that she and her husband were having a conversation. He had been looking on Amazon for suitcases. They were about to travel. They had a conversation about it. She went back to her computer. All of a sudden, she was seeing ads for suitcases on her computer. And from that, she deduced that the Echo had been listening to their conversation, notified Amazon, and Amazon had modified its recommendations based on that. And for that reason, she disconnected the Echo and sent it back to Amazon. I'm just wondering what your opinion is on these always-on listening devices. My impression is that it's doing pattern matching. All of these devices, none of these devices have enough smarts to interpret. Maybe a phone does, but most of these other devices do not have the smarts to interpret your speech. So they will send your speech to the server, but they're not sending everything to the server. They wait to be triggered. So what they are doing is listening and pattern matching what they hear to their trigger words. That's why it's a limited subset of trigger words. And when they hear that trigger word, then they in effect wake up and say, okay, now whatever you say after that, we are going to send to Amazon. It was my opinion that it would be obvious if they were sending all the audio back to Amazon. You could look at it with Wireshark. And I also feel like, besides the clear PR hit, if people discovered that, they don't want all of everybody's audio sent back to them at all times. Anyway, that's my opinion. What do you think?
So, okay, there are two ways this could go. I've mentioned to you before that it is not necessary to pause after you say the trigger word. So, and that was one of the things I first noticed is you can say her name and then immediately start asking the question. But when you use it interactively, there's a delay between you using the trigger word and the little ring at the top lighting up.
By the way, Google Now works that way as well. You can say the trigger words and continue to speak because...
Correct.
And presumably, I would guess what's happening is that they were now recording and sending it back.
So what the device is always doing is listening and streaming all the received audio internally, and so it certainly takes some processing for them to decide if the key phrase is part of that buffer. But the idea is that
I likened it to a grep. It's kind of doing regular expression matching on this stream of audio, looking for a pattern.
And you from an algorithmic standpoint, you can definitely design an algorithm to understand anyone's a large range of speech saying a given word. That is, the word Lex, those sounds can be set so that the device will respond to anyone saying that. And so exactly as you say, then when it's been triggered, it begins storing up the audio, no doubt compressing it, and then almost certainly beams it off to Amazon, where Sirius Big Iron decompress the audio, run it through a standard, sort of like a dictation style system, where the audio is converted to text, text to audio conversion, and then run through some sort of neural network to figure out what it was you did. Now, at the same time, with bandwidth and connectivity and so forth, it's conceivable, and power. I would say, we know that we have text-to-speech available now in relatively small devices. There's nothing that would prevent that device from doing local text-to-speech, except training. Training is normally really required for reliable text-to-speech, and there's no training that you have to go through, although there are some phrases that you can, when you set up the device, that you can read to her in order to improve just the general recognition. It's not clear whether that stays local or whether that is sent to Amazon as part of the profile of the users of the machine. So it comes down to what you were saying about using Wireshark. Given these allegations, people will presumably look more closely at the traffic coming from that device. If nothing much happens until the trigger word and the question, and then there's a flurry of network activity, then we can assume it's not listening all the time and sending the stuff back. My guess about that particular story is that there was some searching for luggage that was done before the conversation in front of the device, and then some more surfing was done, and look, from the original searching that was done beforehand, now we're selecting ads and so forth. Or
that's what I said. I could come up with 3 or 4 scenarios that are much more likely and make much more sense than the Echo listening at all times. And by the way, many people have Wiresharked the Echo. Unfortunately, it's SSL, so the traffic is encrypted, but you could tell by the volume of data that it's not sending back audio at all times, nor is the Connect, nor is Google Now, nor is OK Siri or any of that stuff.
Yes.
No one would design it that way.
No, it would flood. It would create a denial of service attack on the data center to have an incredible number of streams of data coming in 24/7.
And as I pointed out to our guest, you can, but if there are plenty of other privacy harms that are genuine, you don't need to make up FUD in order to prove your point. And in fact, you damage your case, if you ask me, if you start inventing harms that don't exist, because then people question your credibility in general. And so it's unfortunate that this kind of stuff gets around. And yeah, of course, there's nothing to say that there isn't a switch at Amazon headquarters that the NSA could come in and say, oh, by the way, we'd like to listen to everything that comes out of Leo's house. Of course, I carry around a smartphone, which has a microphone, a camera, a GPS device, and it's in my pocket at all times. Yeah. Frankly, I think the NSA is much more likely to bug that. And I doubt that this so-called privacy expert destroyed her smartphones. Anyway. Yep. It'd be easy to, for instance, for Amazon to say, oh, we see you have the same address as somebody who's searching for luggage. We think you might be going somewhere. Or, there's lots of ways you could think of this as happening. Yeah. Without having to make Amazon's Echo more.
Yeah, it may have been booking those airline tickets. That was
precisely. Precisely. All right, thank you. I wanted to get a security expert to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on all points, except that technically, you could do local text-to-speech, although...
Oh, of course you could. But if you look at what's in the Echo, it's not nearly powerful enough to do that on a regular basis.
So Comodo, who is, bounces into the doghouse from time to time, they've done something called Cromodo, which is their Chrome version. They took the Chromium source and basically said, oh, we're going to have our own web browser. Yay. And so it's called the Cromodo Private Internet Browser. And on their webpage, it says, fast and versatile internet browser based on Chromium with highest levels of speed, security, and privacy. Now, okay, one wonders, why would anyone use some random browser when you get the real browser from Google and Chrome, and it's free? But I'm sure, again, this is for the people who our listeners provide support for, who are using them for tech support. Turns out this thing is not only not the highest level of speed, security, and privacy, but it's arguably the worst. Google's Tavis Ormandy talked to Comodo. They didn't fix the problem. The 90 days expired. And so, as happens, this went public. Tavis wrote in his posting, when you install Comodo Internet Security, okay, now this is the other thing, is they're advertising their browser, but it does this to you. When you install Comodo Internet Security, by default, a new browser called Cromodo is installed and set as the default browser. Additionally, all shortcuts are replaced with Cromodo links, and all settings, cookies, and so forth are imported from Chrome. They also hijack, and no doubt if you are using Firefox or IE, I'm sure they have a generalized, what browser were you using? Now we're going to suck all that in and import it and take over. They also hijack your DNS settings, among other shady practices, writes Tavis. Cromodo is described as, quote, highest levels of speed, security, and privacy, but actually disables all web security. He writes, let me repeat that. They disable the same origin policy.
Is that the third-party cookie thing? What is that?
Oh, Leo, it's worse. Okay, and which is the perfect question to lead me in. Absolutely, without exception, the only way using browsing on the internet today is secure is every single, except Cromodo's, rigid enforcement of same origin policy. And to use a quick analogy, you can think of it as utterly rigid domain stovepiping. What same origin policy enforces with absolute rigidity is that script running from a given origin is only able to manipulate or access resources from the same origin. So, and this has become important. Once upon a time, when you used GRC's web pages for a long time, there were actually even now, I don't think I have any third-party stuff on my, I might, no, there's a Google, the Google search box, I think maybe the only third-party thing. But the Wayback Machine websites, all of your content came from one place. It came from the site you were visiting. They sent you the images, they sent you the media and the pages and so forth. Of course, that's all gone. as we all know, anyone who's used Ghostery or uBlock Origin or I mean anything, you go to a site now and 50 different sites are pouring stuff into this page because the page you go to refers to content on all those other origins, all those other domains. So the only way that is secure is if every single item that's get loaded is stovepiped to its own domain. It can't do anything to any other domain. The domain's cookies or the domain's assets. Cromodo doesn't enforce that. It's probably the only browser in the world that doesn't. It's a catastrophe. And these jokers did the same thing with Tavis that we've seen before. He gave them a proof of concept that was one particular example that he just threw together in a few lines of JavaScript, demonstrating how he could, well, for example, you could obtain all of the session cookies for all of the other domains that a user is logged into and send them to some third-party malicious site. I mean, it's unbelievably awful. And so they disabled one of the function calls that Tavis happened to be using, some exec function, even though, very much like a similar issue we covered a couple of weeks ago, you just do it a different way. So they didn't solve the problem at all. They just killed his particular proof of concept. So for what it's worth, Comodo Internet Security brings along with it, and by default takes over your system's current browser with the Cromodo browser that does not enforce same origin policy, which is, I mean, there's just no words. You're just giving your system to the bad guys. It's like this is worse than maybe this could be a remote code execution. No, this is any script from any other site that runs on that page could access all the cookies in your browser from all the other sites you visit. And since cookies are the way we maintain login state, they could then impersonate you on all the sites that you visit, or do anything they want to. It's just unbelievable. And they've blown him off. They said, thanks, but here we broke your proof of concept. And he's like, well, okay. Oh, it's just unbelievable. And this is one of the problems with doing something like Chromium. Many people have said, hey, Steve, why don't you open source your freeware? It's like, because I don't want people to take it and make it malicious or say, hey, look, here's a DNS benchmark and embed malware in it, or just do a bad job. I mean, I'm sure these people aren't malicious, nor I have no idea how this could have possibly happened, but they don't seem to have gotten a clue when someone with a strong reputation said, this is really bad, and they just ignored him. So, wow. Yikes.
And it's a crappy name, too.
Yes, it is. It's like,
Cromodo. That sounds bad, just the name.
It's really, yeah. Oh, wow.
This is now, we got to make this clear, by the way. There's some confusion, because there's also Comodo with a K, which is an internet firewall company. That's not the Comodo we're talking about here, right? This Comodo. This is the marketing company that put the stuff on the Lenovo laptops.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
It's not the same.
They sell security certificates also.
Oh.
Although
maybe it is the same.
I'm not buying any.
No. Yeah. No, I think there's Comodo with a K. Isn't that the Comodo firewall? Like the Komodo dragon? I might be mistaken.
Yeah. I know that I'm sure there is a Comodo with a K.
Right.
I'm staying away from anything that sounds like them.
This is, no, it is the same. Comodo with a C. They do a firewall as well. Well,
Yeah.
I guess I won't use that.
Please. So Google is increasing the breadth of their deceptive website blocking, which I think is a good thing. It's always sort of controversial when something that sells itself as a search engine, which is just supposed to be indexing what's there, gets into the editorial business, starts saying, we don't like this and we don't like that. I mean, it's dicey. But the reality is it's a good thing to help users be protected from clicking on links that they are getting, after all, from Google through Google's facility. And so if they click on a link that they got from Google, and by the way, on that page are a lot of ads that's generating revenue. So it's a revenue generating enterprise that works because Google's providing you with links. Does Google have no responsibility for what happens to you if you click those links? So what's happened is they've started blocking websites that use what Google calls deceptive content or ads, which would cause you to do things you wouldn't normally do, like fake download buttons that are confusing and appear right next to the real download button, or pop-ups informing you that you need to download an updated media player to view the site's content. So it's hard to argue that that's not a net benefit for the internet's users. And we've seen this before. This is extending the definition, though, from malicious content to deceptive content. Nobody, I think, would argue about being blocked from clicking on a link that is taking you to a site with known malware that will infect your computer. It's like, thank you very much. This is, beginning to blur the line, but still, so many people who don't know better click the link.
Yep.
Up pops the window that says, "Oh, you need to update your media
Drives
player."
me crazy.
Yeah,
a lot of I've encountered a lot lately because I've been playing a lot of Minecraft and Minecraft mods, and when you are downloading the mods, these guys who make these, they don't have any bandwidth or download storage, so they use these kind of sketchy downloading sites that are loaded with these buttons, and you have to really carefully parse the page to figure out which of the download buttons is the one you want. It's horrible. And
they're trying to also get you to use their installer.
Yeah, well,
it's like, you use our installer. It's like,
uBlock Origin blocks SourceForge, which, SourceForge used to be the place to get open source software.
I know.
But now there's so much cruft on those pages.
And remember that CNET used to be good, and
downloads.com is terrible.
You can't use them now.
Yeah.
We've just lost them.
Yeah. I always tell people, get the software from the person who made the software, if you can. And sometimes, though, these guys are, small-time guys with no bandwidth, and so then you have to go to these
you do want to go to the source. And, of course, this is where the advice of never download something you didn't yourself go looking for. Don't and, again, our audience knows, and unfortunately, the rest of the world is going to get caught out by this. It's like, they don't know how computers work. They're just like, I famously have a friend who thinks Google is the internet. That's what I was talking. I was talking about a URL. She says, "What? Well, no, just use the Google. That's the internet." Okay, Judy, fine. So, they're calling it safe browsing tech. And it does puts up, it's a full interstitial page, a big red scary, it's the red, instead of the blue screen of death, this is the red page of warning from Google that just says this is a site that is not good. Now, the good news is this puts some incentive on sites that have not completely gone over to the dark side to come back, because if Google blocks you this way, your click traffic just collapsed. So if Google decides that they don't like the way your site is behaving, you're not getting any links from Google anymore, and that's going to put a serious dent in your click traffic. So it is a nice way of Google using their market power to in a way that's arguably helping users to also fix the sites that are behind this big red screen that prevents you from going there anymore. Those sites will have to change their behavior if they want Google to allow their users to come through. And I don't know how they couldn't. And then one last piece of a little Google news. This sort of follows on what Amazon has said. Starting September 1st, Chrome will start blocking all Flash content that it decides is not central to the web page, in quotes, central to the web page. So Flash content such as ads or auto-playing videos on non-video websites will be automatically paused by default. So it's the auto-runness of them that starting September 1st, Chrome is just not going to let them run. You'll still be able to click on them to play them if you wish. And so embedded video players on sites like YouTube will, well, especially YouTube, but also Vimeo will still work. But Chrome is going to take a look at the page that you're asking it to display and say, we're just not going to let those Flash things run. So this is, again, more pressure against Flash and moving that same content over to HTML. It's still the majority of ads that are animated are being served in Flash just for reasons of inertia. And boy, if this podcast teaches us any lessons about inertia, just say IPv6, like inertia, or RC4, or SHA1, or any of the things that we talk about that people just do not want to give up. Okay, so the posting on Slashdot by a person whose handle I cannot read. I wouldn't read even if this was on a cable TV channel.
Oh dear.
Click on that first Slashdot link, Leo, and you'll see why I'm not giving you his name.
People use weird handles on Slashdot.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he writes, and this got picked up widely because it was so inflammatory. Even with telemetry disabled.
I just read his handle.
Yeah. Even with telemetry disabled.
I think it's expressing his disappointment with this news.
Or with his upbringing.
Yeah.
Windows 10 talks to dozens of Microsoft servers. And so on Slashdot, he posts, curious about the various telemetry and personal information being collected by Windows 10. One user installed Windows 10 Enterprise and disabled all of the telemetry and reporting options. Then he configured his router to log all the connections that happened anyway, even after opting out wherever possible. His firewall captured Windows making around 4,000 connection attempts to 93 different IP addresses during an 8-hour period, with most of those IPs controlled by Microsoft. Even the enterprise version of Windows 10 is checking in with Redmond when you tell it not to, and it's doing so frequently, he writes. Except none of that is true.
Oh, well, I'm looking at the log. What's going on?
This guy, whose name I can share, Jesus Crust, although, that's bad enough, but still not as bad as the Slashdot poster. So let me tell you what he explains, and I read it very carefully several times. So Jesus Crust writes, like many of you, and this is on voat.co, Like many of you, I am concerned about the telemetry, spying, and other surveillance features, known or unknown, of Windows 10. It has concerned me enough to push me to Linux Mint as my main operating system. Even so, I wanted to better understand Windows 10, but internet search results for a decent Windows 10 traffic analysis leave a lot to be desired. As such, I decided to do my own investigating of what exactly Windows 10 is doing traffic-wise and post the results. For this analysis, I wanted to simply analyze the network traffic of Windows 10 on a clean install and just let it sit and run without using it. In other words, he disabled nothing. So this report,
this is the default
yes,
express settings,
which we know, causes you to need a larger bandwidth connection to Cox or your ISP.
No, wait a minute. He says, I've chosen the customized installation option where I disabled 3 pages of tracking options, he says.
Where?
Right here.
Oh, how did I miss that?
So, I had read this as well and did note that.
Installed on
now, and by the way, this is Windows 10 Enterprise. Oh. This is, by the way, not the Windows 10 you're getting if you do the free upgrade. This is a different version.
You're exactly right. He said, you're right. I have chosen in the third point. I just missed it because it wasn't a bullet point. He says, I installed VirtualBox on Linux Mint laptop, installed Windows 10 Enterprise PNG on VirtualBox. I have chosen the customized installation option where I disabled. Well, thank you, Leo. I'm glad it completely changes the nature of this report.
Well, but also the fact that it's enterprise changes it too, because this is not the version most people are going to use. I'd love to see this. But you know what I got out of this? How useful it is to run DDWRT, because you can turn on this kind of analysis at the router. You don't even need to use Wireshark.
Yes.
You can monitor all these connections. I mean, Wireshark lets you see what's going on.
Yes.
But you can at least monitor these connections. And 1,619 connections to one particular Microsoft address in one 8-hour period.
So he posts the 8-hour network traffic to 5,508 connection attempts. And then breaks it all down. He runs it into a MySQL database, and then resolves the IPs, does reverse lookups, builds a whole table. I've got the link in the show notes for anyone who's interested, and it is comprehensive. So, I guess the presumption is an enterprise version would be less snoopy than, being corporate, less snoopy than a home version.
Maybe.
But
maybe
again,
not.
who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
One of the things that we know happens is if you turn off all the tracking, you don't use Cortana, you don't use Bing, you turn all that stuff off, and that you can do in those customized settings. You still have Windows telemetry, and that's not just on Windows 10, that's 7 and 8, that sends information about how you use Windows back to Microsoft. For analysis, and I would presume a lot of this. What is interesting is a lot of these addresses are Akamai. They're connecting to a CDN.
Yes.
So that's not typically where you would send data. That's where you would get data, right?
Yeah. Generally, that's the case.
So that's not phoning home.
So it may have been installing a series of patches and updates over time.
Who knows? Yeah,
it may settle down.
Yeah. I think that I'd like to see more of this, and frankly, I'd like to see some Wireshark stuff. And some of this is port 80, which you could just throw out, right? I mean, that's just browser stuff.
Well, actually, the port 80 stuff means that you'd probably, if they didn't bring up their own encryption tunnel, it would be in plain text, and you could get some sense for what it was going back and forth.
Right.
Although a lot of it is also 443, so that's over TLS.
the most connections is over port 3544. That's probably the customer experience program, the telemetry.
And that,
stuff.
those are UDP packets over that port.
Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's certainly
so
it's another data
chatty.
point.
Yep, another, and again, I'm not. Everyone knows how I feel. I will never use it, so I'm not afraid of it. People are welcome to use it if they like, and knowing what's going on. After the news dropped a couple of weeks ago that Microsoft was actively planning to militate against future chipsets running anything other than Windows 10, and essentially not supporting, not taking the effort to support retired versions of the OS. And given that I'm committed to never going beyond Windows 7, I have purchased a state-of-the-art Haswell chip and all of the components and begun to build my next machine, which is intended to be my last Windows machine, and I think it probably will. It'll, the one I'm using has lasted me a decade. I think my next one that'll run Windows 7, it'll last me a decade, and by that'll take me into my 70s. And at that point, you'll be the only one I ever talk to.
And you'll be using a PDP-8 most of the time anyway.
Oh, I'm going to switch to a Mac. The moment I'm no longer a Windows or Intel code developer, once.
Why not BSD? Why not
I think I probably will. I mean, I am a free BSD person.
I think you would really like it, to be honest with you.
I think
or
that's
Linux.
The right place.
I love Mint Linux, and it's frankly, it's absolutely as usable now as Windows 7 was. But I know you need, because you're coding for Windows environments, you can't.
I am, and I have a lot of server-side code, and so running Windows 7 synchronizes me with Server 2008 R2, which is what GRC is now on, and where I also intend to stay. The reason I bring this up is that I have a complete experience now with Microsoft's patches to prevent the Windows 10 upgrades of Windows 7, and they work beautifully. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. They're not for the timid. You need to install one or two patches which are not part of the mainstream patches. Microsoft's not giving them to you, either recommended or optional. You got to go get them. And we covered it a couple weeks ago. There's one for Windows 7 and a different one for Windows 8.1. When you install those, it adds features to the group policy and registry that allow you to completely shut off permanently all of the GWX, all of the Get Windows 10 nonsense. So I set up a brand new Windows, I installed Windows 7 Ultimate on this box that I've built. And first thing I did was, before I installed any updates, it was SP1, Windows 7 Ultimate SP1. First thing I did was I installed that one update for Windows 7 and then flipped a switch in group policy saying turn off updates for Windows 10, and I added a couple keys to the registry, and a value had already appeared from the patch that was set to 1 to prevent it. I added one more key, a GWX key, and then I went hog wild, installed hundreds of updates since Service Pack 1, bringing the machine completely current, and no sign at all ever. And it's been up for a week of any attempts to mess with Windows 10. So I wanted to let people who feel as I do know that if you do that, you don't need a third-party app, you don't need anything else, just that, and it really does shut this down. In the ongoing 2016 battle, 2017 probably, about what we're going to do about encryption, I wanted just to note that the conversation has escalated from various state legislators to one of our major national senators, John McCain, who gets a lot of press and attention. He did a guest editorial, which I'm sure he didn't write. I'm sure he staffed it out. This was a guest editorial which appeared last Friday, February 5th, in Bloomberg View. And there was nothing unpredictable about it. It did have sort of a predictable anti-Obama political component and spin, chastising our current presidential administration for their the stance they took last summer of deciding to drop the whole encryption issue for the time being, or maybe having conversations with Silicon Valley, but not going any further. And of course, it completely ignores the fact that encryption is already an available third-party add-on, which says it doesn't matter whether your platform's encryption is strong end-to-end encryption, which is now the jargon everyone is picking up. The politicians are saying, "Oh, it's the end-to-end encryption that's a problem." So, the argument in McCain's posting or guest editorial in Bloomberg View is end-to-end encryption needs to be if not outlawed, it needs to be altered so that the government is able to get in. And this reminded me that one thing I wanted to remind our listeners and ourselves is that metadata is still floating around. Metadata is not content. And whereas strong end-to-end encryption protects the content, one of the things we are continually seeing is that the internet is not designed to protect the fact of communications. We now have the ability to completely and robustly make them private. That is, the content of them private, but not the fact of them. And, we spent a lot of time talking about Tor and the amazing difficulty that exists in keeping the fact of communications secret. It's incredibly difficult to do that because that's not something the internet is good at doing. It wasn't designed to do that. We're able to layer encryption onto existing connection stream technology, but not somehow obscure the connection stream. So metadata is still there, still available, and I would argue a very powerful surveillance mechanism that isn't thwarted at all by securing what goes through the connection. How many sponsors do we have, Leo?
Oh,
2 more?
yeah.
Now might be a good time.
I should have told you.
I'm about to get into the amazing hack of the decade.
Oh.
And I need to catch my breath and sip some coffee.
Have a cup of Java. By the way, I know you're working on sleep. Did you ever consider that maybe the quantity and concentration of the caffeine you consume in mass quantities every day might have impacted the overall effectiveness of your sleep?
Of course I did.
Oh,
I went completely off.
You
caffeine.
did?
Completely.
When was that?
It was about 2 months ago.
I did not notice any
Cold
difference
turkey.
in your demeanor.
No.
You must have had a splitting headache for a couple of days.
I go bouncing into Starbucks at 5 a.m. when I have a negative outcome on a sleep experiment, and I ask for my 6-shot venti whole milk latte, and they say, "Steve, you really don't need 6 shots
You
of
need
caffeine."
to cut back, sir.
Even at this time of the morning. No, the caffeine, I just like the taste.
Oh, I love caffeine. I love coffee.
Yeah, and it's got a nice bite to it. But, I'm also drinking drip brewed espresso, which has very low caffeine content. So one of the things I was curious was, when I go cold turkey, how bad will my withdrawal be? I had almost none.
You didn't get a headache? Because that's
almost. It's back here.
Yeah.
I never get headaches. Headaches are not something that ever happens. Just had a mild headache the next evening, and then it was over. But by the way, it had zero effect on my sleep. It had zero.
Nothing.
And by the way, Leo, I'm
I know you got it
zeroing in
licked.
here.
No, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I can't wait because these bags under my eyes have looks like they're a little overpacked. I'm gonna have to
Google
pay.
knows you're shopping for luggage.
Yes, they do. Our show today brought to you by our great friends at Squarespace. Squarespace is the place to make your website. We talk all the time about how great it is. My website, leoville.com, is proudly hosted on Squarespace, and I loved it. I loved setting it up. I loved the experience. I have more pictures to upload there. I've been using it. I use the cover page feature, which, by the way, if you don't need a full website, you just want like an introduction on the internet, it's great and very easy to use. But then I also use it for a blog, a portfolio, for calendar. I mean, tons of stuff in there. And it's just so easy to use. Now, the nice thing about Squarespace is you don't have to know anything about CSS or HTML or JavaScript or anything. It hides those details from the normal user. And you get great templates with state-of-the-art engineering behind the scenes, so they're all mobile responsive, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't often talk about the developer platform. And I know people listening to this show are geeky enough that they want to know, okay, fine, but can I do my own thing? And yeah, you can. The Squarespace developer platform gives you full control over your site's HTML, your CSS, the JavaScript. There's a JSON API to output content from the CMS. So you can actually you can get direct access to the content management system, to the data, the content, draw your page any way you want. You could start with, of course, one of their existing templates. If nothing else, do and look at it because the code is incredible. But you can also use a base template and do it from the ground up. They've got a base template. Once you register as a developer and you turn on the developer button, SFTP is enabled. You know you want that, of course. Git works, so you can use Git to commit, write it locally, commit it up to the Squarespace server. I mean, you got everything. So it is an amazing platform. And, of course, you get the great Squarespace hosting that never goes down. You get all the benefits of Squarespace. You even get things like the free custom domain with annual purchase. You get the mobile responsive design. Commerce is built into every single template. I presume even the base template. I'm pretty sure, which means your template that you're going to design, whether you use the existing ones or you do your own from scratch, is going to be reflected even in the shopping cart. And as far as I know, this is the only platform where the shopping cart doesn't look like something hanging off the back, a caboose off the back of a website. It is all yours. You know, they don't go to another domain, and you get a great commerce solution. It's really sophisticated, including people get shipping help there. There's integration with third-party shipping tools, inventory tools. Really sweet. And if you get stuck anywhere, 24/7 customer support. They're easy to reach via phone, but also email and chat, 24/7. It's a no-brainer. And the nice thing is you don't have to believe me. Just go there and try it. It's free to try. Squarespace.com. Do use the promo code Security Now if you buy, because we're going to get you 10% off your first purchase. Security Now, one word. But try before you buy, by all means, and you can mess with it all and really get a sense of what it can do. You can even import some of your existing data into the CMS so you can see what would happen. These guys knock it out of the park every time. They blow me away. Squarespace.com. Offer code Security Now for 10% off. Squarespace, you should. Back to Stephen Gibson.
Okay.
Yes.
This is just so great.
Hack of the week.
Hack of the decade.
Of the decade.
Oh, Leo, you're gonna love this one too. So, this is from the Checkpoint blog.
Yeah.
Where they announce an eBay exploit, which is quite severe, which eBay says, we don't think so. We're not going to bother with this. And boy, it's so clever, and eBay is wrong. So Checkpoint writes, Checkpoint has discovered a severe vulnerability in eBay's online sales platform. This vulnerability allows attackers to bypass eBay's code validation and control the vulnerable code remotely to execute malicious JavaScript on targeted eBay users.
Oy.
Yeah, really bad. If this fault, but wait till you hear how. That's the fun part. If this fault is left unpatched, and Checkpoint already informed eBay, and eBay said no. So Checkpoint said, okay, this will make a great blog posting.
Yeah.
If this flaw is left unpatched, eBay's customers will continue to be exposed to potential phishing attacks and data theft. An attacker could target eBay's users by sending them a legitimate page that contains malicious code. Customers can be tricked into opening the page, and the code will then be executed by the user's browser or mobile app, leading to multiple ominous scenarios that range from phishing to binary download. After the flaw was discovered, Checkpoint disclosed details of the vulnerability to eBay on the 15th of December, 2015. However, a month later, on January 16th, 2016, eBay stated that they have no plans to fix the vulnerability. The exploit demo is still live. Okay, now, remember that, and we've talked about this in many contexts through the years, it is crucial that any site which allows someone to post content which will be shown by that site to be sanitized. The famous example is, Johnny Drop Tables, where drop table is an SQL command that you don't want your SQL Server backend to interpret when it is processing a web page. But the broader example is you don't want users to be able to post their own content which your site will display because it could be malicious. Okay,
it's the XKCD comic of Little John. All you have to do is Google Little Johnny Drop Tables, and you'll find it right away.
So the vulnerability. Checkpoint security researcher Roman Zakin, and I'm reading still from their blog, then I'll go into details, recently discovered a vulnerability that allows attackers to execute malicious code on eBay users' devices. And I ought to mention, and our listeners will quickly realize, maybe not only eBay. This thing has broader consequences. Using a non-standard technique called, and this is not subject for work or whatever, that NSFW, JSF **K is the way they're naming it. Mm-hmm. This vulnerability could allow cyber criminals to use eBay as a phishing and malware distribution platform. To exploit this vulnerability, all an attacker needs to do is create an online eBay store, which is to say, their own pages, eBay pages. In his store details, the attacker posts a maliciously crafted item description. eBay prevents users from including scripts or iframe tags by filtering out those HTML tags. However, by using this JSF**K, the attacker is able to create code that will load additional JavaScript from his server. This allows the attacker to insert remotely sourced and controllable JavaScript that he can adjust to, for example, create multiple payloads for different user agents. eBay performs simple verification, but only strips alphanumeric characters from inside script tags. That's the key. eBay strips alphanumeric characters from inside script tags. The JSF asterisk asterisk K technique allows the attackers to get around this protection by using a very limited and reduced number of characters. Now, the technique was invented by a guy named Martin Kleppe, K-L-E-P-P-E, and it is so wonderful. It uses nuances of the way JavaScript interprets empty sets and Boolean values and typecasting. It only uses 6 characters: open bracket, close bracket, open parens, close parens, exclamation point, and plus. So the open and close square brackets, that's JavaScript's array element and object properties and things like numbers of elements in strings operators. The open and close parens are used to call functions and avoid parsing errors, so to create explicit groupings. Plus is used to append strings and also to sum elements and cast elements as numbers. So if you put a plus in front of something that's a string, it assumes, oh, they want me to convert that from a string value, like a 1, 2, 3 string, into the numeric value 123. And an exclamation point casts anything following it as a Boolean. So with that understanding, you can use a ton of just those 6 characters to essentially do anything you want. To get, for example, to get a numeric 0, you put a plus sign in front of an open bracket, close bracket. So the open bracket, close bracket is an empty list, and when you cast that to an integer, JavaScript gives you the number of elements in the list, which, because it's empty, would be 0. Similarly, if you do an exclamation point and then open bracket, close bracket, that yields a JavaScript value of false. 2 exclamation points inverts the first exclamation point and gives you a value of true. If you put a plus sign in front of a true value, JavaScript casts that to a 1. So now we know how to get a 0 with a plus, open bracket, close bracket. We know how to get a 1 with a plus 2 exclamation points, open bracket, close bracket. We can cast that to a string by following it with by following it with a plus, open bracket, close bracket, and so on. In the example, there's like this crazy string of plus, open paren, plus, exclamation, open bracket, close bracket, plus, open bracket, close parens, plus, open parens, exclamation point, plus, open bracket, close bracket, plus, exclamation point, open bracket, close parens, plus, open parens, and I'm about halfway through. So you continue with that for another about that far, and you get the integer 1, 2, 3. So despite the fact that alphanumerics were excluded by eBay, this technique taken to a crazy extreme, and there's an example on the link in the show notes if anyone's interested. And Leo, you can show it the link is up on the previous page. Right. Amazing hack of the decade. You click there, you can get a sense for it. It is an incredibly long, and again, someone had to really want to do this, but you can. And this allows anyone. That's what it looks like. It's just crazy.
It's a paste bin of a very long string with these brackets.
Yeah, all it is a very clever patiently constructed concatenation of combinations of 6 characters that causes JavaScript to turn this into a regular JavaScript code that does anything an attacker wants. And eBay says, yeah, we don't think this is a problem.
What?
Well, they'll be changing their tune. And the other problem is there are many sites which don't use a whitelisting approach. They use a blacklisting approach where they'll say, oh, wait, is this a script tag? Okay, don't allow it. Is it a this tag or a that tag? And so they disallow tags they know are dangerous, but they default to allowing other things. This technique will probably see far wider use very quickly. It's very clever. It's very dangerous.
Wow. And it's really interesting, yeah.
Isn't it cool? How you and they go on to show how they can get a subset of letters, and that those letters then they concatenate those to create function names, and then those function names with appropriate arguments allow them to leverage still further in order to until they get to the point they can do anything they want to.
Basically using arrays and parentheses for calling functions, plus to append strings, and the negative, the not, the bang to cast elements to booleans. You can generate anything.
Yes.
In some sort of obfuscated fashion.
Very, very clever.
That is really smart. It's a good code, by the way.
So I wanted to quickly cover some errata. Last week I misspoke, and our sharp-eared listeners said, Steve, you said Ethernet packet. We know you meant Ethernet frame. It's like, yes, I did mean frame. So thank you.
What is the difference between a frame and a packet?
Well, a frame is the proper term for the equivalent of an IP packet.
All right.
So an Ethernet frame.
because it's not IP and it's not routed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And a packet would be contained in an Ethernet
an
Ethernet object,
right.
And the name of Ethernet objects are frames rather than packets. So I stand corrected, and I wanted to, in case I confuse anybody else, let them know. Now, Leo, you'll remember that I talked about an auction for the very cool Zio Sleep Manager Pro at the beginning of last week's podcast. Excuse me?
How many did you sell?
Okay. As you'll remember, by the end of the podcast, almost 100 had sold from that auction. That is, that auction was sold out.
In other words, by the time you downloaded the podcast, there weren't any available.
And that was a concern because I wanted any of our listeners who wanted them to be able to get them. Right. The auction people, URT Outlet, posted 355 more.
Wow.
They all sold out.
Wow.
They then posted 460 more. They all sold out by 1:30 p.m. on Friday.
See, we could have saved Zio if they just advertised on this show.
Oh, I know.
Wow.
That was a total of 915 sold from the beginning of last Tuesday. And I haven't looked, but they just yesterday, and I'm looking for, because I closed.
They must have just bought tens of thousands. I mean,
Firefox.
Do we know how many they got in the bankruptcy auction or whatever it is?
I don't have a number. Let's see. Last time I looked, they were at 236 of a new auction, and I just refreshed the page. They're now at 253.
Okay.
So here's what I wanted to tell our listeners. Anyone who was excited but happened to go when they were between auctions, they're back, and they have plenty of them. I have updated the grc.com/Zio page with the link to the auction. They hit some sort of limit that eBay imposes, so they had to switch to one of their alternative identities, but they're the same people. And I just wanted to share this nice note that gives you a sense for them, and how impressed I have become. and I got this a couple days ago. Good morning, Steve. I think this was like maybe even Tuesday before the most recent things happened. And this is Dawn, who is their asset sales supervisor. She said, yes, this is an awesome phenomenon. We only have matched sets right now. We do not have any more single headbands. So that's worth noting. They for a while they had the whole kit for $40, brand new surplus. And then individual headbands, they sold out of those. And since the pod doesn't work without the headband, they can't sell any headbands alone, at least for now. And then Dawn said, I did post another 460 this morning. That is an accurate number for listing, as we are counting daily so we do not oversell this product. I think there are about another 300 plus after the 460, but I need them to be counted. I need them counted to be sure.
Well, they're glad they bought these.
Yeah. She said, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we so appreciate your work and she has in quotes advertising for us, that we are sending you a thank you package. And actually, I received it. She sent me 2 headbands as a courtesy. Oh, that's nice. And some gift cards for a meal at a local restaurant.
Wow.
So I thought that was very nice.
Boy, Steve, you're lucky you're not in broadcasting. I'd have to bust you for Plugola now.
Anyway.
Yeah, so you got a little side bet here. All the apple garden you can eat.
She says, we know we do not have to, but we wanted to. And show our appreciation for your like of the product and letting people know about it. We did not raise the price, as we wanted you to have credibility with your listeners and give them a great deal.
Nice.
Thank you very much for the broadcast, and we are trying to make all your listeners happy. We do not usually ship out of the U.S., but you have a few followers in the UK, Canada, Brazil, and Australia that would like them. We are making special arrangements for these followers. Wow. Then she says, thank you again. I would like you to know we are a team here, and with Angie, Jose, Chad, and Angela's help, we're getting these packages out in a timely manner. Dawn Ames.
Wow.
So
nice.
Anyway, I'm impressed with them. I kept worrying that they were going to jack the price up because, they've got something. They sold 1,000 of them last week. They made $40,000 last week, and they may imagine they could make it $50 each, but they haven't. So again, if anyone didn't look, the grc.com page last week was just a link to their auction. I now have had time and had a lot of feedback from users, a whole bunch of first use tips. So if you have any trouble at all with it, grc.com/Zio is now a rather comprehensive page to get you started using your Zio. And people are beginning to play with it and actually are loving it a lot. I did want to mention that The Expanse is over. I watched the final 2 episodes. I didn't see them. I think they're on Tuesday nights, so I didn't see them by this podcast last week. But it's just fabulous, and I found myself actually wishing for an inversion. Normally, I read the books because the books are so much better. In this case, I found myself wishing that I had not read the books, so that I didn't know what was going to happen because the presentation was so good.
Well, good news. I haven't read the books.
Good.
I think I started Leviathan Wakes, but I don't know if I finished it.
Well,
it's gone beyond that, right?
We only get 10 episodes, and I think the last episode. Oh, and I forgot to mention. Remember how I'd been saying how unhappy I was with the beginning? That the very beginning seemed really wrong.
Yeah.
That no one who watched it would have any idea what was going on.
Yeah.
It turns out they did this out of sequence. They took us back to the beginning, having teased us with like what happened after that, and completely filled in all of that missing stuff so that it's now completely clear. So
should I watch it in a different order?
No. Do it their way. I'm always annoyed when shows do that. That's something that people do now, but that I find really annoying is you got to keep track of. Wait a minute, did this happen now? And wait, who knew what when? But still, it does bring us current. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from other people who are saying, yeah, this thing, it's great sci-fi.
Can't wait.
I did want to mention that two recent breakthroughs in energy. On the 10th of December, so early last month, Germany fired up what they're calling their Wendelstein 7X, which is a funky type of tokamak, which is actually called a stellarator, and it has 7 weird twists in it. So it's as if, I'm sure there's some sort of, it reminds me of some sort of a donut of some sort of like an old-fashioned, except if you took an old-fashioned donut and kind of did a Mobius thing to it so that it has 7 twists. It turns out that, a supercomputer designed it. No human could have done this without a supercomputer, but the nature of the bizarre asymmetries, they believe, gives them a tremendous advantage. So it was able to attain 80 billion degrees for a quarter second. And of course, just to remind people,
80 billion degrees?
80 billion degrees.
That's like off the scale. I mean,
it's very hot.
It's hotter than the sun.
And we need that for fusion because we don't have gravity. The sun has the advantage of a huge amount of gravity.
A lot of pressure. So
yes, and so we're trying to do this, in a basement somewhere, not instead of the center of the sun. But what caught my attention was a quarter second. That's a long time because these things are normally like, okay, we're sure that happened, but it was so short. We need to make sure that the recorders were running. But 80 billion degrees for a quarter second. Everyone was jumping up and down. Now, unfortunately, well, not unfortunate. I don't mean to say that. China yesterday did 50 million degrees for 102 seconds. Oh, is that a picture of the stellarator?
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that the funkiest looking thing you have ever seen in your life, Leo?
Only in Germany would you think that this was a good idea.
Oh, I know.
What?
There's if anyone's curious about fusion, there are some wonderful animations there about, oh my God, you just look at it and it just makes your head hurt. It's like, what in the world? Look at the shape.
How do they heat things up? What is jeez.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It's funny, too, because the support system, the support infrastructure for the thing is like 7 times larger than it is. It's this little crazy-looking donut thing, all funky and twisted and bent, but then everything it needs in order to feed it is just like way bigger than it itself. But anyway, China has built a traditional...
This is the Max Planck Institute, so this is credible. This is not... Yeah. So, but China's trying to do it too, huh?
Well, they went to 50 million degrees, but for a stunning 102 seconds, which is like amazing. Now, some of the research or some of the reporting, I said, let's remember this hasn't been independently vetted, blah, blah, blah. But, okay, so yeah, you're showing the animation of how the 7 twists in the stellarator works. And anyway, that's a great
seems
video.
Made up.
Doesn't it? It's just like too crazy.
If this were a science fiction book, you'd go, oh, come on. Apparently they built it in Minecraft.
Yeah, the graphics are
primitive, let's say. But they're busy doing other stuff.
Yes, actual.
Oh my goodness!
Look at that sucker. Yeah, and like nothing is symmetrical. Nothing. It looks like something
alien technology. It looks like is what it looks like. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, and so that shows you how all individual bizarrely designed, computer designed rings, and in order to have instrumentation, they had to have holes in different places where it would be useful to see something. And so there's an example of one of the magnets, and another one, and another one.
So they're using magnets. Is it particles they're accelerating, or what are they?
It is a hydrogen plasma. So
they're exciting the gas.
Yes, so it's a plasma, and so you need to heat it up and squeeze it, and so it uses the plasma is conductive, and being conductive means that you can influence it from an externally applied magnetic field in order to contain it, and so all those crazy magnets are like supercomputer designed in order to move the plasma through this conduit in the proper fashion.
Of course, the problem with this is you put so much energy into generating the conditions for fusion that you're not getting a net gain.
Right. And of course, and there are some now that are beginning to be break even. And here we're doing a trip through the inner workings to show, and that those are equal potential lines of magnetic force that we just flew through.
Well, of course they are.
So cool.
Anyway, so are they getting to the point where they have enough? They're getting enough energy out to justify the energy in, or?
Yes, we're not quite at break even, but we're beginning to be at the point where we're not having to beg for money to pay the electric bills anymore.
That's interesting.
It is beginning to actually work, and these are all early proof of concepts. But the concept here is we're burning matter, right? Like the sun does. We're going to simply instead of fission, which is such a messy energy generating technique, we're going to fuse matter. We're going to burn matter.
Instead of breaking down large molecules like uranium-235.
In the same way that the sun.
We're going to build up hydrogen. From hydrogen to helium or something.
Exactly.
And energy is released. Step 3, profit.
Yeah, it's funny because the person who tweeted that the note about China to me this morning, he sent back, but we're a long way away from having that in our kitchen or pocket. And I said, yes, but remember the size of the first computers.
Right, we may not be as long as it looks.
Yeah.
The first thing is to make it happen.
Yeah.
Have they actually had a fusion occur?
Yeah, sustained fusion reactions.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So they're taking deuterium and turning it into tritium or something.
Yep.
Adding a little proton there. Wow.
Boy. It's hard to know if one of those things is out of place. That's just crazy.
I don't know. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. It's crazy.
So I had a nice tech support interchange that I wanted to share, and also solve a problem that some SpinRite users have. Greg forwarded me part of the email thread, but not the person's first contact. He started with his reply, where Greg says, "Do you have an internal SATA drive?" So the guy probably said, SpinRite won't run. I'm getting like this red screen that says divide, I can't remember if it's divide by 0 error or something. That happens to some systems on some motherboards. So Greg replies, "Do you have an internal SATA drive? If so, in your motherboard BIOS settings, you'll likely find an option to switch your SATA motherboard to something called Legacy IDE, Legacy Operation, or Compatibility Mode. Maybe just ATA or IDE." And Greg says various BIOSes call it different things, but the idea is that the SATA controllers are made to appear as standard traditional IDE ATA drives. We've encountered instances where the newer SATA BIOS code was less well tested than the older and more solid legacy code which SpinRite uses. You should restore your motherboard to its previous SATA setting once you're done running SpinRite on your SATA drives. And so that's the case. What's happened is that by the time that the AHCI technology came along, no OSs were really using it. They would just use it to boot themselves, and then they had their own AHCI drivers. And that's the support that I most recently added to SpinRite as we move to SpinRite 6.1. So I'll be solving this problem by moving us away from using the BIOS. But at this point, SpinRite 6 still does. The problem is that SpinRite uses the heck out of the BIOS. And if you have a late model drive, the BIOS defaults to AHCI mode or SATA mode using BIOS code that is buggy. So, and this has been the conundrum, is it isn't a bug in SpinRite. There's nothing I can do to fix people's motherboards, but except to cause SpinRite not to use the motherboard at all. That's the main feature of 6.1, from which we'll get all kinds of benefits. In the interim, simply switching it back to ATA it uses the legacy BIOS code that does not have the bug. And people think, oh, isn't that slower? No, it turns out it's not any slower than using AHCI. You're still able to drive the drive at full speed. Anyway, so in receipt of this email, someone named Forrest said, Greg, thank you. I'll make the suggested changes to the BIOS and start SpinRite again. So then the follow-up email from Forrest. I wanted to let you know that the BIOS ATA settings allowed SpinRite to run, and it worked. I was able to recover the pictures my daughter had taken around Europe in the fall of 2014 when she was doing a study abroad her junior year in college.
Oh.
Now she'll be getting the pictures for her Valentine's Day present.
Oh.
She studied marketing overseas, and as a photography major, she was very disappointed when the last week of her semester, the hard drive crashed. I had been saving up money to send the drive off to a data recovery group, but thanks to SpinRite, that wasn't necessary. Now she can add a few of her pictures to her website. Thank you for creating such a great tool.
Wow, Steve. That must make you feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's
wow. What a nice
the payoff.
story.
That's the payoff.
Isn't that great? All right, we got a few questions. It is a Q&A episode. We're going to kind of focus on the Y router solution we discussed last week. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Audible.com. We love books. Steve's a reader. I'm a reader. Steve likes to read ebooks. I'm kind of a fan of audiobooks because, Steve doesn't really have a commute. His commute's too short for audiobooks. But if you spend,
coffee pot.
Yeah, if you spend any time in the car or doing the dishes or walking the dog or on the treadmill. See, Steve likes to read on the treadmill. I can't really do that. I love listening to Audible.com. A great place to find books. 180,000 books across all kinds of literature, fiction, nonfiction, periodicals. I do a lot of science reading here. In fact, when we were talking about fusion, I thought, I'm going to see if I can find some fusion books. This one's actually a wonderful book about the boy who played with fusion. It's a true story of extreme science, extreme parenting, and how to make a star. It's about Taylor Wilson, a young boy who became kind of an academic science superstar.
He is way smart, too. This kid is
you know
neat.
the story? Yeah. Really fun book. And then I thought, well, I want to learn more about fusion. Well, how about this? Daniel Clary's book, A Piece of the Sun, The Quest for Fusion Energy. You could learn more about this. And then, of course, there's the skeptic writing. Charles Seif writes, Sun in a Bottle, The Strange History of Fusion and the Science of Wishful Thinking. And there have been a few people who have claimed to have created fusion in their garage. You saw that crazy stellarator. It's maybe not something you're going to build in the garage. But this is a great example of how Audible can teach you, Audible can entertain you. Lots of great science fiction, including the entire expanse series. So after you've watched the show, if you want more expanse, you start with James S.A. Corey's Leviathan Wakes, and you can continue on from there. They have the entire Expanse saga. Science fiction used to be, when I first joined Audible 16 years ago, they didn't have a lot of science fiction. I was a little disappointed, and they knew that. They love sci-fi. So they started what's called the Audible Frontiers program to record audiobooks of the greatest sci-fi novels ever written, books that were written in the pulp days and so forth when people didn't do audiobooks. And now, I mean, their collection of science fiction is second to none. You can really enjoy a ton of fantastic science fiction on Audible, but also mysteries and thrillers and history and certainly science and technology. There are 339 Doctor Who books alone. There are 93 Star Trek books alone, 155 Star Wars books, including the new one. This I've been told by many who saw the movie The Force Awakens that this book actually explains a lot that wasn't clear in the movie. There's some new stuff too. John Malkovich reading Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions. That's great. Can't wait to listen to that. So here's the deal. I'm going to get you a book free because I know a lot of people hear about audiobooks and they go, I don't know, is that right for me? Would I enjoy it? Would I be able to follow it? What would it be like? Well, get your first book and you find out for yourself. Ooh, this looks good. SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome. Oh, Mary Beard. She's a legend. Wow. All right, I think I'm going to put that on my wish list right there. So here's the deal. Go to audiblepodcast.com/security now. And you're going to be able to sign up for the Gold account. That's a book a month. You also get the daily digest of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And you pay nothing for that first month. In fact, you can cancel any time in the first month, pay nothing ever. But the book will be yours to keep forever. That's one of the things I love about Audible. They never expire. When I started doing audiobooks, I'd get mailed cassettes and I had to mail them back in a month. And if I didn't finish it in a month, I'd never get to listen to it again. Every book I've ever listened to on Audible for the last 16 years is on my Audible library, and I can go back and listen. And to be honest, there are a lot of books I never got around to listening to. And so I've got Audible. I've got some great Audible listening stored up, ready to listen to. You will too. On your iPhone, on your Android device, your tablet, your desktop. Even works on a Chromebook. You can listen anywhere. audiblepodcast.com/security. Now your first one's free. All right, Steve.
Forgot to mention one thing. It's in my notes and I just skipped over it. The Zeo Sleep Manager pods only run with Android.
Oh, you have to have an Android phone because they, for some reason, left the software on the Android store.
Correct. And Amazon this week through February 13th, took $10 off of the 7-inch Kindle Fire tablet. So it's $39.95. It's $40. Wow.
And you can use that with it?
Yes, I do, and several other people are
so it's not just in the Google store; it's in the Fire store, the Amazon store, because that's a different store.
Actually, no, it's not. You need to.
Oh, okay.
You need to run a patch. I have the links to it on my page. But someone's worked out how to install the Google Play.
Do a side load. Okay.
Well, you can side load, or you're able to run Google Play. The Google Play services on your Kindle Fire, and then have access to all the Google Play assets, including the Zeo Sleep Manager Pro app.
That makes it much more attractive.
So yeah, and that's what people are doing is they're iOS users or they don't have an Android, but they just buy a cheap Android tablet. And I just wanted to mention that this week Amazon has them for $40.
Nice.
And works great.
Cool.
So okay, Nate Smith tweeted me. He said, "Hi, Steve. Could I open up some ports on the IoT router and reach in from within the private LAN? Seems like NAT on the root router would push a request over to the IoT modem's WAN IP. Does this break anything? And this was the sort of my opening and a great opportunity for essentially giving our listeners one additional toolkit for ways to understand this so that this and other sorts of problems can be solved. As I mentioned last week, the way IP routing works. So basically, we have IP routers. Within each network is Ethernet as the carrier medium for these IP packets. Yet, as we said, the Ethernet is locally constrained. So a router has two sides, the WAN side and the LAN side. There's an Ethernet network on each side, yet it is an IP router. So the Ethernet serves only to get the IP packets to and from the router. The router only deals with IP. So we get Ethernet isolation, and that's the key of the security to our three router solution. The Y approach is that there is no bridging or communication of Ethernet across the routers. There is only IP routing. And so what I want to focus on a little bit is some subtleties of IP routing in this context. So we all know we've seen 192.168.something.something, or maybe 10.something.something, and so forth. And there's this concept of blocks of IP space, blocks of IPs being in the same network. So, for example, 192.168.0.1 through .255, that is where the last tuple, the last byte of the IP address numbers individual machines in the network. And the key here is, what does in the network mean? Well, in the network means that they all share the 192.168.0. That is, they all share the prefix and then have different suffixes. And the way the prefix is determined is the so-called subnet mask. That's that thing that's 255.255.255.0. It is that number that the 255 is all ones in binary. So 8 ones for the first byte, 8 ones for the second byte, and 8 ones for the third byte, which correspond to 192.168.0. So what the subnet mask tells every device in that network is any IP where the bits are all the same as its own, wherever the subnet mask is ones, is the same network. That is the same local network. And that's crucial, because routers, when they receive packets, we've often talked about how routers receive packets, look at the destination IP, and then decide which interface to send the packet out of. Well, that's also happening in our homes with our own home routers, exactly like big iron routers out on the internet. So the idea is that with this 3-router Y configuration, there are 3 routable IP networks. There's the Y configured IP network, which interconnects the 3 routers, and then that's the the LAN of the root router that connects to the internet and the WAN ports of the two isolation routers that forms the Y, and then the two isolated LANs are on the LAN side of at least two, maybe three or more routers, however many you want, as we were talking about. So here's the tricky part. Those intermediate routers, the ones that connect to the private LANs, they will only function if there's a different LAN on each side. That is, in order for packets to cross, they must arrive at the router and be destined for the somewhere outside of the router, so that the router sends them out of its WAN link. So for example, this means that when you connect the interior routers to the exterior, to that root router, their WAN IPs are going to be assigned from DHCP whatever that root router uses as its default LAN. Let's say for argument, 192.168.0 is that root router's network. I don't know, and it's really a function of the router's firmware, what a standard consumer router does if it receives that network on its WAN. That is, normally consumer routers are default to 192.168.0 or .1 . Now, if the router had .0 something, .1 on its WAN, maybe it's smart enough to choose a different internal network for its LAN numbering, but it may not be. So that may be something, this is always user configurable. It may be something you must configure. That is, one of those internal LANs you could set to, and for some of this more advanced inter-private LAN routing you're going to want to, you might deliberately set that to 192.168.1.0 and set the other internal private LAN to .2.0. You can generally change them to be whatever you want to. So that clearly and uniquely numbers each of the LANs that you've created. .0. Whatever is the interconnection LAN for the routers. Then one router, whether it's your private or your secure internal private LAN, that might be .1, whatever, and the Internet of Things could be .2, whatever, and deliberately setting the numbering both assures they're not in conflict and lets you know what they are. So Nate asks, that sort of started this whole thing, could I open some ports on the IoT router and reach in from within the private LAN? And the answer is yes. The idea would be that you would know what the WAN IP of the IoT router is. And in fact, it's easy to use DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, because it just establishes IPs for you. For this sort of a network, you may want to just assign these IPs manually. even on the outside of those routers. We were talking about assigning .1.0 and .2.0 on the inside LANs. You may want to you may want to assign their WAN IPs also manually. So it'll be like .0.1 and .0.2 for the same routers respectively on the LAN side. So that you know how they're numbered, and so that their numbering is not changing. So the idea is that any ports that you open on those interior isolation routers are addressable by that router's WAN IP. So, for example, if you are in one of the private networks and you know the IP and port number of something that you have deliberately port mapped through the other router, you can address it using the WAN IP of the other router and the port number that you have mapped through. So it's necessary to do this kind of stuff. You sort of have to take things off of autopilot so that you know how things are numbered. But the concept is each of the networks should have its own IP space that are non-overlapping. The reason I mention that is technically nothing would prevent both of your interior routers, your IoT and your secure router, from both being 192.168.0. That is, they technically or .1, they have to be a different network than the router interconnection network, but they don't have to be different from each other. Strange as that sounds, because even though it's very much like what we have right now on the internet. Everybody in their own homes has 192.168.0. something, and your next door neighbor has 192.168.0. something. That is, we all are using overlapping networks, yet there's no confusion because the natting converts the IP to the public IP. That's what's unique. The networks behind the routers don't have to be. So just in that same principle applies in our home network. If we've got a Y routing or multiple router with network isolation system, they don't have to be numbered separately. But if you don't number them deliberately and separately, you cannot route between them. Because if they were both 192.168.0. something, then any packets you were trying to send from your network. Wait a minute. No, that's not the case. If you were, because you're addressing to the other router's WAN IP, so you can number them the same. Sorry about that. I confused myself. This is a little confusing, as I'm sure everyone now knows. You are able to route packets because you are addressing to the other router's WAN IP, which you probably want to make sure has not been addressed dynamically. So Nate's answer, the answer to Nate's question is yes. Again, take it off of autopilot, manually assign these IPs if you want to do more fancy work like this, or if you just plug things together in autopilot mode and it sort of doesn't work, it may be because the routers just don't know how to handle a 192.168 style IP on the WAN side. So you may have to manually configure either the WAN side to be different from the LAN side, or the LAN side to be different from what it received on the WAN side. So the second question I had pulled, I sort of may have covered. Can Hundley wrote, he said, "Hi, Steve. Your Three Dumb Routers podcast answered several questions I had about this, but I have one more that I'm hoping you can answer and maybe something worth mentioning on your show. I have a fourth router that I need. It's required by Comcast for their home security system, and I have no access or control over it. With this setup, I would have at least 3 wireless routers. Will I run into any potential issues having so many wireless networks in such a small area?" And I know of none. There is really no practical limit to how many routers you can have. I mean, practical meaning up to 254 or so, but certainly 3 or 4 shouldn't be a problem. And maybe if all of the routers were next to each other and saturating their bandwidth and all on channel 11, that could cause some problem. But probably your IoT devices have very low bandwidth. I don't know what Comcast and their home security system is doing, or maybe whether it's also being used to stream media. But it makes sense to physically move the access points from each other a few feet apart if you can, and maybe to put them on different channels just to give them their own Wi-Fi channel space so they're not really actively fighting each other. But otherwise, they ought to work just fine. And you can run as many as many routers off of spokes from the root router as you want to. And finally, Yuki Takazawa said, "Hey, Steve, I just listened to the Three Dumb Routers episode, so I just wanted to DM you a quick question. I get the isolation property with any of these approaches. My number one issue is sharing a printer on my home network among secure and guest networks. Perhaps a more sophisticated VLAN routing software/configuration could do this, but it seems hard with a simple setup, even if I use multiple routers." And to Yuki and everyone else, it's really not necessary. This is covered by what Nate was asking. That is, you could leave the printer behind one of the interior routers and map a port through which the other network would know how to get to. It is the case that packets would from one network would then be transiting from the shared Y network into the network where the printer is. So, for example, if the printer had known vulnerabilities and it was in the secured network, something malicious could potentially find the printer and crawl into the printer and get up to some mischief. But you could put the printer over in the untrusted network, on the IoT network, and then map a port to it so that from your trusted network, you are able to reach through both routers and into the printer. Or you could put the printer out in the common network. That is, it would be on the IP network that all of the routers share that links them together, and then be available easily to any of those. Again, though, the danger is that, and this is why we have this network isolation behind routers, you wouldn't, if that printer were compromised, if some malware somehow got into the printer, it's then on the common network, potentially thanks to it being Ethernet, able to see all the traffic coming and going. So I think I would put it over in the IoT side. I would treat it like an IoT device that I want to give some selective access to from my secure network. And so it just looks like the IP of the IoT WAN, and any traffic that goes out of my secure network will be routed over through the other router and to the printer. So you absolutely can selectively create controlled intercommunication, but between the secured networks. And there, as Nate indicated and Yuki gave us an example, there are reasons why you would want to. So that's how it all works. I think we got this one taken care of.
Yeah. All your questions answered to your satisfaction. One hopes, but of course there's always next week. And
there's tinkering and playing with configurations, and a lot of people like this idea. It was way more popular than I thought because it does offer such good security against this growing threat from wacky devices where security is an afterthought. And I'll probably share what Brian Krebs wrote about this, some of his thoughts next week when we talk about it. I'm sure this is where an increasing percentage of the podcast is going to go. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to take some time, even though we have talked about it before in less detail. I think creating a truly isolated network for this crazy interconnected device stuff makes sense.
Steve, once again, you've done it all in a mere 2.5 hours. If you want to watch the show live, bring lunch and tune in every Tuesday at about 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC. You can bring dinner too, and listen in. We do the show live then, but of course always after the fact, on-demand audio and video is available. Steve has it at his site. That's grc.com. While you're there, by the way, lots of free stuff, including SpinRite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility, his sleep research, his vitamin D research, Squirrel, which is going to change the world of logins forever, and much, much, much more. grc.com. He also has transcripts, written transcripts there. We have audio and video at our site as well. That's twit.tv/SN. There's a YouTube channel. You can find that at youtube.com/twit. Look for the Security Now channel. And, of course, you can subscribe on your favorite podcatcher because after 11 years, there's not a podcatcher around that doesn't have this show. Security Now on the Twit Network. Thanks, Steve. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, my friend.